Welcome back to WD.
FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. We're your hosts, Bri Bertoluccini, Marketing Manager.
And Chris Mullen, Senior Marketing and Communications Coordinator for the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Well, we are excited to welcome author Natasha Yim to our podcast today. Natasha will be reading her new book, Disney Pixar Turning Red, Like Mother, Like Daughter, in an in-person story time in our Learning Center on Sunday, May 7th. Learn more about reserving your free ticket on our website. Welcome to the show, Natasha.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to chat with you today. And to kind of start us off, going back to the beginning of your career, when did you know you wanted to pursue writing children's books?
Well, I've always been interested in writing. I always like to tell kids at school visits because I think the teachers love it because it was a teacher that actually inspired me to want to be a writer. In seventh grade, my seventh grade teacher assigned us this writing assignment, and I was just got really caught up in just using my imagination, creating stories. I've always wanted to be a writer. I don't think I actually got into children's book writing until in my late 20s. I happened to be working at because most of my career outside of college has been in social work and counseling. And so I was working in a residential treatment center where kids who could not live at home were living in away from home and in this residential facility. And there was and they were very young. They were, from 7 years to 14 years. So of course there was, a lot of fears and anxieties and kids just missing home. And so because I always remembered growing up, my mom was always both my parents were big avid readers, and we always got story time at bedtime. It was just such a nurturing, calming routine, to go to bed with. And I wanted to bring that to the kids who didn't have a home or who felt displaced. So I started incorporating bedtime readings for all the kids, and it was just I just realized the power of story to really soothe and comfort kids, and also enable them to sort of open up to telling their own stories. So that was when I decided, I want to write for children because I think books make a much larger impact on kids than they do for adults.
Absolutely. Well, my mother, the former English teacher and elementary school principal, will love that story. Now, for people unfamiliar with how children's books are written, what is the kind of timeline for writing a book and the typical challenges that you face along the way?
Yeah, people are always really surprised at how long it takes for a book to get written and published, especially for picture books, because picture books involve illustrations. So then you have to get the illustrator on board. They have to do their, magic to the book. So typically, and I know with Disney, it was a little bit of a different process because Disney have the pool of illustrators already, and so they're getting their illustrator on board was a lot of a quicker process than it would be in normal traditional publishing. But outside of the writing itself, it takes about 2.5 to 3 years for a picture book to get on to the bookshelf. So, and that's not including the writing time, and of course that varies from project to project. Usually, I would say for a picture book, just from the writer perspective, the writing and the editing would take at least a year, and then trying to sell your book to a publisher that can take anywhere from I have a couple books that took one book took 9 years and one book took 12 years to publication.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a challenge like that. That's a long time to be trying to get your book published. And that's just is that with a book agent? Are you it's just trying to get a publisher to kind of bring it to life at that point?
Trying to get a publisher to bring it to life. At the time, I didn't have an agent with these books, but I was simultaneously selling it to, I think, agents as well as publishers. The book that took 9 years, is my book Goldilocks and the Three Pandas, and that ended up being my most popular book. And that book one publisher had it, but there was a revolving door of editors. So editors kept leaving the company, and then another one come in, and every editor that had their hands on it had a different editorial vision. So, so that book took a long time just because, there were different people handling it, and that happens in publishing too. It's part of the industry where sometimes editors leave, come and go, and then you're almost working from scratch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, having to be at
Yeah.
the beholden to to the corporations, to the publishers, that's just so frustrating. But it ended up turning out well because that is, like you said, one of your more popular books. So
Yeah.
it all worked out in the end.
It did. It did.
Well, for you touched on this in our first question, but much of your career has been in counseling, social work, and specifically
Mhm.
working with children. Through your experience, how does the power of literature positively impact children's development?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, is it's just there's such for especially for young kids, the just connecting to stories. I remember even with my own experience growing up, and every time my mom would read us a story, just kind of getting into that whole imaginative world. There was something so magical about it, especially if it was a world that was totally unlike our world. And even as an adult, I remember just really getting into the Harry Potter books, just because it was, it would have been so nice to just have this like normal world, and then you pop over here and you go through, some railroad station wall, and you end up in this completely fantastical world, that was outside of our imagination. So, there's something so magical about storytelling and pulling kids into a whole different world and a whole different set of circumstances and different characters that they can identify with. So I think that's just really special for kids, and that's why I think young kids, if they really connect with the story, they're asking for that story to be read over and over and over again. And I think as an adult and as a writer and as a parent, that was well, not as a parent, but as a writer, that's like what you want kids to do. You want kids. Your book to have that kind of connection with a kid that they wanted to be read over and over again. As a parent, I remember, oh my God, I have to read this book for the 25th time. So, so sometimes it was I would deliberately pick a shorter book if I was really tired and say, oh, how about we read this book instead? But, from the other end, the other perspective as a writer, that's what you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. There are still books that my parents read to me over and over as a kid that I had memorized as a small
Mhm.
child that I still can recite today. It was
Yeah.
just like the power, and I just remember how exciting that feeling felt. I can't exactly remember. My parents recorded me of like the excitement of being able to memorize as if I was actually reading
Mhm.
before I was, could actually read. So that
Right.
excitement is there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you look at like Disney history,
Mhm.
these stories over time told via literature, usually at first, and then into animation or into live action. The importance of story and taking us on a journey, immersing us, having characters that we relate to and root for or root against. It's always been really central to Disney's storytelling. So I think that's a cool kind of intersection there. And sort of bringing it back to Disney history, you did a virtual story time with us, the museum,
Mhm.
back in 2021 for your book, Mulan's Lunar New Year, based on one of
Yeah.
my personal favorite films.
Mhm.
It was your first project with Disney. How did your involvement with that book come about?
And that's the interesting thing about writing. I never say if I have the time and I never say no to a writing project because you never know where one project leads to another. So I got a call out of the blue from a Disney editor, and she said, "Oh, we want to write we wanted to do a Chinese New Year book." With Mulan, and and we want not the movie Mulan, but a younger Mulan, like a 7, 8-year-old Mulan. And I asked her, well, how did you find out about me? And she said, oh, I read your book, Go Luck and the Three Pandas. And that one has a Lunar New Year theme. And so that book then led to this Disney book. And of course, I said, yes, it sounded like a really fun project. I love the Mulan story and the Mulan movie. And so it was just a perfect fit for me. So I wanted to do that story. And that's how I got uh, you know, into the door of doing that book with Disney, and then that eventually led to the later, Disney books with Turning Red, like Mother, like Daughter. So once again, never say no to any writing project. You never know where it leads.
Yeah, that's definitely great advice. Never say no. Leave
Yeah,
the door open.
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
for Mulan's Lunar New Year, that is such a special book as it takes place during Mulan's childhood, a time period that
Mhm.
had previously never been explored in the Mulan franchise. What were
Yeah.
some of the challenges faced and kind of exciting moments along the way while developing this story?
Well, I think one of the challenges of doing a intellectual property type of book that is based on a movie or a story that's already out there is and d- with Mulan and Disney, that story is already out there. So so it's not my story per se. So there's like certain parameters you have to follow. I can't just kind of make up things. I have to kind of follow along the what Disney had created for Mulan as a character. And there were questions I had. Do I include what's the dragon's name? I can't remember. Yeah, do I include Mushu? Do I include some of these other characters that were in the movie? And she said, "No, no, we just want, Mulan and her family." Um, and so there were some parameters like, one of the challenging things was they didn't want, Mulan, the movie Mulan version, they wanted a 7, 8-year-old Mulan, but she's got to have the personality of the movie Mulan. So, it's those little things that I had to incorporate into the story. So to find a way for her to be kind of spunky and clumsy and, the things that we loved about Mulan in the movie, but drop her age down to 7, 8-year-old. And there is no 7, 8-year-old Mulan character because, she didn't exist. So I had to create that. So it was a very fun project, but it was challenging in terms of that it wasn't just coming straight out of my imagination. So I had to kind of fit it all into sort of a box.
For sure. And that kind of relates to your Turning Red project, that it's
Mhm.
this, established character, this established relationship, and you're taking kind of a different side to it than what we've seen in the film. So, comparing your experience with Mulan's Lunar New Year, how was the process the same or different? What were kind of lessons you learned that you were able to apply? How did your time differ working between the two projects?
It was a little bit different in that, so there was a little bit more creativity with Mulan because even though the Mulan character was already there, um, her 7, 8-year-old self wasn't. So I had a little bit more creative license to kind of create her character. And also the story was set in Lunar New Year, so I could create. Just how to set up the scenes and what the activities that she was gonna go through in preparation for Lunar New Year, so all that was, kind of, more, creative, and then with, um, the Turning Red book, Like Mother, Like Daughter, because it was Pixar and it was based on the movie that was coming out, it was much more rigid in that sense. I had to follow the script, so I got to see an advanced script, and I had to follow the script in terms of so there was an ending where I kinda took a little creative license, and then Pixar said, no, we want you to keep to this ending." So, yeah, so there was just a little bit more rules, I guess, I had to follow in terms of the plot structure and the plot line and all that.
Yeah, that's kind of exciting though to be able to see the plot lines of a new Pixar movie, and especially Turning Red. Turning Red's now like a new favorite for me. It's so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, it is fun. And it was really fun to kind of get the script beforehand and to kind of see, because I got also just to have like a preview screening. And of course, that normally in normal times the screening would be at a movie theater, but because it was during the pandemic times, it was on my computer, and I could kind of screen it from home. And it was just really interesting because not all the animation was done, so you saw kind of the movie. Not all of it was color, so you would have some colored shots, and then you would have some black and white, and then there was some they hadn't even added the animation to the characters, so they were like bouncing around, like the arms and legs weren't moving, and so it was interesting to kind of see their creative process as well. Um, and then for me, just reading the script, it was, I remember thinking, oh, this is not your mother's Pixar movie, because I felt like the characters they're all preteens, right? They were
Mhm.
13 or 12, and then and so it was much more like the characters were kind of a little bit more snarky, and so I thought that was really interesting. It was definitely older than other Pixar movies.
Would you say that like the stuff that you saw in advance
Mhm.
influenced the direction of maybe the story, or maybe when you saw kind of the screening, did it was it any different than how you saw it in your mind as you were going through the story beats?
I think the movie when it came out did sort of closely. I think from when I read the script, they made some changes, but it wasn't too much. I think the movie followed along pretty closely to the script that I saw. Um, what was different in from the script to the story I wrote was, first of all, I mean, the script is, I know what it was, 120 pages, it's like a full length movie. And to kind of distill that all down to like a 32 page, less than 1,000 word picture book, that was the main challenge. Is like, how do you take this movie? And, so there was a lot of discussion, and I had a great, great editor at Disney. And she was just wonderful. She's very supportive, and she had some great uh, suggestions, and was somebody I could talk to at any time when I was like, hitting a brick wall. And I think that was the main challenge, was figuring out what was the thread that we wanted to run through the story. Which part do we want to focus on, and which part is just stuff that we don't need to worry about.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so in the end, we felt like the mother-daughter relationship was the main theme of the movie, and that was what we wanted to bring to the book. But how to do that in less than 1,000 words, that was the challenge.
For sure. And so, what do you think is
Mm.
so significant about like a children's book that you felt like this story could really translate well from the film to a book?
I think it was the mother-daughter relationship, because, most kids have that, strong bond with, their mom, and even if you didn't, or you had, it was something that every kid wants, right? They want that connection with their parent. But at the same time, there was um, May's May, is that the daughter?
Hmm.
I always
Yeah.
get mixed up with it. Yeah, Ming is the mother, I
Mhm.
think. I always get the 2 mixed up. So, um, I think May's need, for autonomy and individuation, I think kids can all relate to that as well, even if they're young. That's why they have temper tantrums sometimes, because they are forced to do what their parent wants them to do, and they wanna do something else. So, I think that's very relatable for kids, and I think it's very universal also. So I think I really connected with that storyline, and my editor felt like that was, something that would be really good to, focus on as well.
And you kind of mentioned this, that kind of finding that through line of the mother like daughter theme, and that kind of came during the editing process. What was the original pitch? Was it just like write a book about turning red? Was that just kind of the overall thing that you were presented with at the beginning?
Yeah, it's interesting because they never give you something very specific in the beginning. So it was like, yeah, we want you to write this book, based on the movie. And then I got the script and I got to see a screening. And so in the beginning, I did struggle a little bit with, okay, so which do you want me to write it like just kind of a adaptation, like from beginning to end? Are we pulling out some kind of story? And so I think with the editor too, that kind of changed as we were writing the book, because in the beginning she said it was uh, she said that it was going to be kind of more creative. We can kind of decide on what our storyline was going to be. But then as we went along, and she had discussions with the Pixar people, they were more wanting it to follow more closely along with the movie plot line. So I think we went from, oh, we can be really creative with this, to now we have a little bit more structure and parameters. And then so we decided, we had to pick out what were the scenes. So when we decided on the mother-daughter relationship theme, then we picked out the scenes that would most fit into that. And I think that's how we sort of evolved the story. So yeah, there was so many scenes in that movie. So we just had to pick the ones that brought out the mother-daughter theme the best, and her conflict with the mom.
Well, the sense I'm getting is that a project can really vary from any other project that you've done before. It all depends on the story itself, but also the parameters, who you're working with, deadlines, editors, all of that. For folks that maybe just be starting out on their writing journeys, what advice would you give them, particularly young authors, maybe some that are interested in getting into children's books?
I would say, to go to as many writers' conferences or workshops as possible. Just really learn the craft. Writing for children is just so different than writing for adults or any other genre, because you're writing for really young kids. So you have to know the language. You have to know just the word count, and for every different, picture book has a different word count than middle grade, has a different word count than chapter book. So you have to kind of know, all the terminology, and know, what is your target, who is your target audience, so um yeah, so I think, just learning the craft, going to conferences, workshop, because those are the places too, where you can connect with editors and agents as well. So then, and also connecting to your peers and learning from those who are, doing the same things as you are. And, because I think when I first started going to conferences, I started realizing that, you can't just write a picture book in a week and get it published the next month. It's a long process. And so I think you just start learning more about the industry and how the industry works, and I think that's really important.
And then for kind of more independent authors, is there a focus that you should be building connections with illustrators to kind of help illustrate your books? Or is that something that comes with like in the publishing, like once the book is actually greenlit to publish, that's the work that they do, is matching you up with an illustrator?
Yeah, so in traditional publishing, we don't have I wouldn't say we don't have any say. It depends on the publishing house, but it is the publishing house that decides on the illustrator. And generally during the whole process, writers and illustrators, never the twain shall meet. So so I don't even communicate with my illustrator. I've worked on some of my other books, for example, with Goldilocks and Three Pandas with Charles Bridge Publishing, and I really love working with them because they do involve me in the process. They don't, they'll send me like a couple of illustrations and say, these are the illustrators that we're thinking about. Which one do you like better? So in some ways, I get a little bit of a say in that. And then they'll show me, they'll keep me in the loop by sending me like the black and white sketches, and then when she starts filling it out in color, and then they'll ask me for my input on, what do you think of these illustrations? Is there anything that you see that is inaccurate? So I do get a little bit of input into that, but I usually work through the editor, who then works through the art director, so I don't have any direct communication with the illustrator.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, Natasha. This has been such a fun and enlightening and wonderful conversation. Really made me, relish the times of my youth of reading children's books. And so thank you so much for your time. And we hope to have you back on our podcast again soon.
And for folks listening, check out our calendar to see all of our upcoming events, including an in-person story time with Natasha on Sunday, May 7th. Copies of Disney Pixar Turning Red, Like Mother, Like Daughter are available for purchase at the museum store. Thanks again, Natasha.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been great fun.